Hey there YouTube, this is YuGiOh. I'm coming to you today with a video discussing Mulligans. I am part of one of the larger Digimon trading card game Facebook groups, and over the past few days, the group has been absolutely flooded with Mulligan posts. Whether or not this game should or should not have a Mulligan. Um, and I have a viewpoint on this, but I'm gonna kind of put that more towards the end of the video. Instead, I'm gonna more go over card games, and why they do or do not have mulligans. I'll put my thoughts for the Digimon game at the end of the video, but just to let you know just how bad the mulligan discussion got. We actually had to have an admin say, from this point forward, I'm deleting all posts that have the word mulligan, because the group was just absolutely flooded. And I just searched up mulligan on here, and there's some that I even saw that have been deleted, and literally it was just, you'd open the Facebook page, and there'd be 2 to 3 new posts almost every time you opened it, just about mulligans in the game. So we're gonna kind of discuss card games that do or do not have mulligans and why that is. So we're gonna start off with the most notable game with mulligans, Magic the Gathering. So we all know that Magic has mulligans. What many people may not know is all of the different forms of mulligan that have been there over the year. I didn't even know about the original mulligan as I was researching for this episode. The original mulligan actually had it where if you had drawn 0 or 7 lands, then you could reveal to your opponent. You had to reveal to your opponent that you had 0 or 7 lands. In order to mulligan and shuffle back and draw a new hand. I actually didn't know that that was a rule at one point, and that they didn't change that rule until 1997. So they've had multiple different mulligans. Overall, they're currently using the London mulligan rule. So we'll kind of go through on what their different mulligan rules were. The original mulligan rule was you had to have 0 or 7 lands, so your hand had to be completely dead for you to be able to reveal it to your opponent, which now gives your opponent information on what you're playing, to shuffle back into your deck and draw a new hand. In 1997, they changed it to the Paris mulligan, which is what a lot of people kind of know to this day, which is you can do it as many times as you want. You don't need to reveal your hand, and you just shuffle back the entire hand, but you draw one less card. In 2015, they switched to the Vancouver mulligan rule, which was after you've mulligan to a hand that you consider acceptable, you can scry the top card of your deck. So just look at the top card and put it on either top or bottom. And today we're using the London mulligan rules, which this one doesn't actually say when that one took effect. But I know it was in effect when I started playing on Arena. So that one is the whole every time you mulligan, you do draw up to the 7 cards, but then for every time you mulliganed, when you finally get to an acceptable hand, for every time you mulligan, you put a card in your hand to the bottom of your deck. So no more scrying, you're just putting things to the bottom of your deck, and that's kind of where the game is today. Why Magic has a mulligan rule is very, very obvious. You cannot play the game if you have no land. But you also cannot play the game if your hand is nothing but land, or if you have too much land, or you have only a couple land but everything in your hand is high mana cost. You just cannot play the game. It's fundamentally impossible to play the game if you do not draw correctly. The other one on the other side that people know about is YuGiOh. YuGiOh does not have a mulligan. You just draw 5 cards from the top of your deck at the start of the game, and this is your starting hand. There's no, well, let's mulligan, draw to 4. There's no play a couple cards back. Reason for this is because every card is technically playable. Yes, there are bricks in deck. There are bricky hands, but technically you are allowed to play a card. You can basically play any card in your starting hand because there's no resource system dictating what cards you can play. Now we're going to go to the final one of the big three, which is Pokemon. Pokemon's a little bit more interesting. It kind of has that same feel as the original Mulligan feel of Magic, which is it's not a choice of whether or not to mulligan. It's you have a fundamentally unplayable hand. If you do not have a basic Pokemon, you literally cannot play the game. One of the ways to win in Pokemon is to really just get rid of all your opponent's Pokemon on their active and their bench. If they have no Pokemon in play whatsoever, they lose. So the game is absolutely impossible to play if you do not have a basic Pokemon in your starting hand. So what they have it as is if you have a basic Pokemon in your hand, you're sticking with that hand. There's no, oh, I don't, it's playable, but I don't like it, so let's ship it and get a new hand. It's this, you either can play this hand or you cannot. If you do not open a basic Pokemon, you then have to reveal your hand. So this shows your opponent that you're not just faking, oh, I don't have a basic Pokemon. You have to actually reveal your hand to your opponent. This does one thing right there, which is show your opponent basically what you're playing, which information in trading card games is absolutely huge. So that shows your opponent right there what you're playing and that you have no basic Pokemon in your hand. You then shuffle the entire hand back and draw a new hand. And hopefully this time you have a single at least one basic Pokemon in your hand. And then on top of that, for every time that you mulligan in Pokemon, your opponent is allowed the choice to draw a card. So if you mulliganed, it says right here, if player A took 3 additional mulligans, player B may draw up to 3 cards. So yeah. So those are what people consider the big three, and they have a wide range of mulligan rules. I'm going to show off 2 other games. These are both Japanese games. We'll start off with Vanguard because that's the one that's still played here in America. Vanguard has a once you can pick any number of cards in your hand, shuffle them back into the deck, and then draw until you have a full starting hand again. This is because it's trying to, again, it kind of fits that whole, the game becomes fundamentally unplayable if you do not have the correct cards. Because of the rules of the game, if your Vanguard is at 0, is a great 0, but If your hand is grade 2 or higher, your entire hand, you cannot play a single card. You cannot play them to rear guard. You cannot ride on top of the Vanguard. The game is absolutely fundamentally unplayable. And the final game we're going to talk about, which didn't exactly do well here in America, but is still to this day really huge in Japan, is actually one of their highest selling trading card games of all time in Japan, and that's Duel Masters. Duel Masters, once again, does not have um, a mulligan rule. And this kind of goes back to kind of the Yu-Gi-Oh thing, though it's a little bit different because Duel Masters does have a resource system. What the resource system is, you can use any card in your hand to be that resource system. So you draw 5 cards, that's your hand. But if you have high cost cards in your hand that you're not going to be able to play right away, you can use those cards to create your, I don't know what they're called in Duel Masters, but play your mana. So, in essence, every card is playable. You might have a hand that's full of high cost cards, and you're not playing for a little while, or it's gonna be an uphill battle, but you are able to play the game. So one of the things that was constantly said on the Facebook page that is demonstrably not true is that every card game, every successful card game besides Yu-Gi-Oh has a mulligan rule, when that is very clearly not the case. Yu-Gi-Oh, obviously, but that's mentioned in the exact Yu-Gi-Oh, but you could say Pokemon doesn't technically have a mulligan rule. It has a, you cannot play this game, let's fix that rule. And same thing with Duel Masters, which again, while not successful here in America, is one of the highest selling trading card games of all time in Japan. So the idea that card games just cannot survive without a mulligan rule is just demonstrably false. And even card games with a mulligan rule aren't guaranteed success either. Because here's the thing about card games, they generally don't last. Here's a list of all the trading card games that have been coming out, that have come out, minus like the last few months. And on the side, it says whether or not they're still in print. And the vast majority of these say no, even as we get closer to modern day. Like, this one was released just back in 2017, and it's already out of print. Several back in 2015, already out of print. Warhammer Champions 2018 technically says yes. I can affirm to you that is out of print. So card games in general just do not survive very long, and it does not come down to whether or not a game does or does not have a mulligan. There's a number of different reasons why a card game may or may not fail. Frankly, I think one of the best playing card games of all time was Warhammer Champions. It's now out of print. This can be changed. No, it is out of print. But the game is not dead because it didn't have a mulligan rule. The game is dead because of mishandling by the company. If you want a list of all the reasons why a game does or does not survive, check out a YouTuber named Kodak, who does a 7 Deadly Sins of Trading Card Games series, in which he goes over a number of reasons why card games do or do not survive. He doesn't cover all of them. I don't think he covers the reason why Age of Sigmar champions died. But he does cover a number of reasons why a card game may fail. So let's go over whether or not I believe Digimon should implement a Mulligan system. I do not believe Digimon should implement a Mulligan system into their game. And here's why. Right now, the game is in a place where a Mulligan system would be incredibly helpful. It would do absolutely no harm to the game and would be incredibly helpful in preventing what people call non-games. It would allow you to make sure you have that rook in your hand, which would allow you to instantly digivolve and start building up advantage. But that is for right now. This game will not stay the same as it is right now. In Japan, there are currently 4 sets in the game. Here in America, we currently have half of the first 3 sets, approximately. There has not really been enough time for something to come in and break the game. Now, people might talk about Omnimon, of how powerful it is, but overall, Omnimon in the future will look laughable. It is not a question of if something will come in and break the game. It is a question of when something will come in and break the game. And at that point, it would become incredibly bad for this game to make that deck that breaks the game more consistent by allowing them to just pick and choose their opening hand. This is a game where technically every card is playable from the get-go. The only thing you really can't play on the very first turn of the game are megas. This puts us closer to the reality that is Yu-Gi-Oh! For early Yu-Gi-Oh! You could have made the same case for a Mulligan as is being used for the Digimon card game right now. The argument for a Mulligan right now in Digimon is if you get stuck with a hand of all high level monsters or option cards, you are so far behind that it becomes incredibly difficult to come back, which is true. You could have made the same case for Yu-Gi-Oh! Where, oh, I opened nothing but tribute monsters, um, spells and traps, and you could even have a correct ratio of things, but you open nothing but spells and traps, but nothing to actually summon. And that ultimately would put you on the defensive, so you could have made the same case for early Yu-Gi-Oh! Having a Mulligan rule as is being used for the Digimon trading card game right now. Would you want a Mulligan rule in modern Yu-Gi-Oh? The answer is no. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! With a Mulligan rule where people are able to pick and choose their hand would be even more over the top than it already is. And Digimon has a big chance of going down a very similar route. Now, I believe that the game mechanics of Digimon will prevent it from becoming the same ridiculousness that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become. That being said, higher quality cards will break this game. And when those cards come, you do not want people to be able to pick and choose their opening hand when every card is technically playable off the bat. When we get cheaper option cards that are good on the first turn of the game, or we get champions or ultimates that are cheap and have strong on-play abilities, you are not going to want players to be able to pick and choose their hand to make sure that they have these cards in their game. Right now, having a rookie in your opening hand is incredibly important. But that may not always be the case with this game. And in those times, you are not going to want a mulligan. So those are my thoughts on whether or not Digimon should implement a mulligan. Yes, it would be incredibly helpful right now with how the game plays. As the game grows in power, the idea that things that are breaking the game can become even more consistent by being able to pick and choose your hand is too much. And that is why I believe Digimon should not implement a mulligan system. Thank you. This is Team EDM, and I'm out.